Yes, here I am.
Hi. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience. As I mentioned, Guilherme is UNESCO's head of freedom of expression and safety of journalists section. So please, if you want to make some opening comments, and then we'll take some questions.
Sure, very briefly, two issues. One, as many of you know, last week it was the International Day to End Impunity in Crimes Against Journalists. UNESCO, and of course, together with the Secretary General, reinforced the importance of fighting the impunity in those crimes, but particularly considering the current situation, underlined the importance of treating journalists as civilians and therefore according to the International Humanitarian Law, but also the Security Council resolutions related to this issue, particularly the 2222. They should be protected in those circumstances to do their work. And as the SG just mentioned in his opening remarks, unfortunately, this conflict is taking lots of journalists' lives in an unprecedented scale compared with previous situations. Additionally, UNESCO launched the new report connected with another issue that was commented a lot during this noon briefing, that is the issue of elections. We did a special research showing violence against journalists in elections which took place in 70 countries during the period of 2019 and 2022. 759 cases of violations of journalists' rights, including violence, during those elections. And therefore, we sound an alarm, considering that in 2024, as many of you know, we will have elections in at least 81 countries. So UNESCO underlined the importance of developing measures to protect journalists' safety when they are covering elections. So this is one part of my remarks. The second part is that UNESCO is launching today, we just finished a press conference here in Paris, a new set of guidelines to reshape the governance of digital platforms to safeguard freedom of expression and access to information while dealing with some of the issues these same platforms are facing, among which misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, conspiracy theories, which the Secretary General also alluded to in his speech in the situation that we are currently facing in the Middle East. So in a nutshell, these guidelines are suggesting a multi-stakeholder process for governing, including regulating, but not only the digital platforms, in order to deal with these negative externalities, again, while safeguarding freedom of expression and access to information. We are also launching today a new global survey undertaken by Ipsos, which surveyed 8,000 citizens in 16 countries, which will have elections next year, particularly to highlight how people all over the world are concerned with the potential impacts of misinformation in elections. And the data is very strong. 87% of the people surveyed in those countries said they already see the impacts, and they are very much concerned about the elections next year. And 88% of those said that the different stakeholders, including governments, the companies, and the UN, should take action to tackle these problems. So I will stop here. These set of guidelines, they were produced involving actors from 134 countries. We received 10,000 comments to this text. So it's really a huge process of collective building of guidance on how to deal with these very present issues in the digital ecosystem. Back to you, Steph.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Valerio Becco from ANSA.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this press conference. Can you please give us more details on the situation in Gaza or like in the Middle East in general? I mean, close to Gaza, and what are the action are planning to take to help like press freedom and journalists to be, more protected, like for what you can do, of course.
So in terms of the actual safety of journalists, it's the mandate of the UNESCO to monitor the violence, particularly the killings. The Director General of UNESCO has already issued several condemnations and asking for an independent investigation regarding these cases, and we keep the monitoring with our partners. On the other aspect, that is the digital problems, the digital harassment, the digital safety, misinformation, hate speech. As I mentioned, we are launching this new global governance guidance today with a strong chapter regarding how these companies, the internet companies, should behave in also in the situations of conflicts, with very detailed indicators in this case that they should put in place an urgent process of content curation and content moderation in local languages, should reinforce the capacities of their own teams and systems on that, be transparent in the way they are doing this, should keep these records for future investigations on this information that is circulating online, and so on. So from one side, there is the issue of physical safety of journalists, and we are reinforcing and putting in place whatever we can to protect journalists as civilians covering this conflict. But on the other side, there are concrete measures in terms of the online challenges that we have regarding this conflict and overall in the current situation in the planet.
Thank you. Margaret Bashir, Voice of America, and then Yvonne.
Sorry, I'm not on. Thank you for the briefing. Sorry, you mentioned something about an investigation there. You sort of breezed through it a little quickly. If you could go back, does UNESCO have any sort of a mandate to launch any sort of fact-finding mission or investigation into the unprecedented number of journalists who've been killed in this conflict, or to call on another body of the UN, a legislative body in the UN, to do so? And does the targeting of journalists, if proved that they were targeted, does that rise to the level of a war crime?
We don't have the power to launch an investigation. The Director General called for an independent investigation of what's going on. What we do as UNESCO is that we have the mandate to monitor the impunity or the end of impunity in all the cases of killings of journalists. So we do a systematic monitoring in all those cases. So we will keep looking into what's happening and keep publishing our permanent data as co-custodian agency on the SDG 1610-1, that is also about killings of journalists, what's happening there, and unfortunately on many other cases of killings of journalists in the world.
And in Gaza, does the targeting of journalists, if it's proved that they were targeted by one of the parties to the conflict, rise to the level of a war crime?
Well, it will depend, again, of the investigations taken under the law of engagement in terms of humanitarian law, etc. Again, you can look into previous conflicts, the way that the independent tribunals took into consideration those cases. But it's very difficult to comment on a hypothetical situation. We'll need to look into the data when a specific and independent investigation takes place.
Yvonne Murray.
Thank you. Yvonne Murray, RTE News. Isn't the problem for journalists around the world the fact that authoritarianism is on the rise? And within the UN system, the number of countries who simply don't believe in press freedom is increasing. And what is your answer to that?
Well, that's precisely why we need to reinforce the accountability systems in all these cases. So this guidance we are launching today is also related to this. Our data is showing, unfortunately, an increasing number of legislation being enacted everywhere, trying to solve legitimate problems such as the spread of disinformation, etc. But this legislation, as you just mentioned, many of these legislations, as you just mentioned, they are having a contrary effect to reduce press freedom, to reduce freedom of expression. but we do think that it's possible to establish a governance system that is fully aligned with international human rights standards. But for that, we need to offer the concrete guidance so that the different watchdogs, including you, journalists, but the civil society organizations, the academics, the think tanks, they can monitor what's going on and issue concrete guidance. In some cases, also, there is the willingness of several of parliaments to produce good legislation, good regulation in these areas. But what we need is to offer the concrete guidance to do that in alignment with international human rights law.
Thank you. Errol Louis?
Errol Louis from Indo-Asian News Service. You spoke both of controlling disinformation, but also freedom of expression. In recent years, we've seen, like, for example, the case of Twitter or X as it's known, and Facebook, where you had government employees trying to control what was considered to be disinformation, but was not necessarily so, as was proven later. So where do you draw the line between controlling disinformation or having a governance system for that and censorship?
So that's why we are saying in this new guidance that I strongly invite you to read, that we are launching today, that is not about regulating specific pieces of content. When you do that, the risks for crossing the line of freedom of expression, they are too high. Any decisions regarding any specific piece of content, if this post or this tweet or whatever is disinformation or is hate speech, etc., this should be taken by a judge following a due process of law. However, there are concrete ways of increasing the governance of the system to actually expand freedom of expression access to information with better processes that can then lead to the diminish or prevention of disinformation and hate speech or other phenomena. So, for instance, when we are asking this governance system first to have independent regulators, those that are not either captured by the political power or by the regulated sector, we are underlining that. When we are saying what the things that governments shouldn't do, we are also underlining the important safeguards to protect freedom of expression. And when we are asking very concrete things for the companies, like to be very transparent in different ways, including the way they moderate and curate content, or when we are asking them to produce human rights risk assessments in situations like the ones we are just discussing, conflict or a pandemic, or how they deal with disinformation on climate change. Any of these is related to a decision of if this particular piece of content is or is not disinformation. These are broader processes that can actually prevent the spread of disinformation or other problems such as hate speech or conspiracy theories.
Just a housekeeping question. You mentioned about a poll that was taken of countries that are going to the polls next year. Could you please tell me if the report has been published or where one can access it?
Sure. The entire deck of the survey carried out by Ipsos commissioned by UNESCO is in the UNESCO website, was just launched here in Paris 1 year ago. You can have access to the full results of the survey, as well as the new guidance we are issuing today about the governance of the digital platforms.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Great. Guillermo, thank you, and thank you for your patience in waiting so long, but we appreciate your time you gave us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure always, Steph. Back to you.